Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing today? It is Monday, March 27th, 2017. Time for another show. Week 10 of the Celebrity Presidential Apprentice. If he still counts as a celebrity anymore, I do not know. Plenty going on, plenty to catch up on from the weekend, plenty for me still yet to do in order to, say, be ready to go on the air. But time has come today. Tick-tock. Ready to go. Okay. I didn't get to my very high-tech solution for my headphones. I went out and did a little bit more supply shopping with all of the, thanks again to everyone with all the generous donations, both our sustaining donations, monthly, repeating donations each month on Patreon, and one-time donations that have come in through Patreon, through PayPal, which we still have an account with, even though we try to close that thing out, through Square Cash, which is giving me a little bit of a headache. But thanks so much for everybody who donated. We've gone out and bought some very, very high-tech double-stick tape that I'm going to use to get a couple more months out of these headphones if I can. The damnedest design. I've been literally trying for months to try to get these new earphone pads onto this thing. They're really just not designed to be easily replaced. So I'm just going to stick them to the surface of the actual headphones itself. I figure that's as good as anything. It'll hold it together. And that way we can string things out. Still working on getting our backup solution all procured and set up, but I think we're okay to go today. We can catch up on all of the dramatic activity of the weekend. The president, that would be Trump, kept himself busy over the weekend. Did you happen to catch that Fox News, I guess, ran something over the weekend? I noticed on Sunday, I think, just an outdoor live shot of the White House with a chyron declaring that President Trump had spent the weekend working at the White House, which is a big deal. That's usually where presidents spend the weekend, of course, and it's usually what they do during the weekend. I'm sure they take a little bit of time off, but Trump takes more time off than most, although he claims not to be taking that time off. He claims to be working. Fox was running this despite the fact that Trump apparently worked in 3 property visits over the weekend, this time once again coming out to Loudoun County, Virginia, to visit his Trump National golf course there. He went out there on Saturday, did the same dance, being really cagey about what he was doing, telling the press that he might play golf, he might not, but he was really there for meetings and phone calls, and then once again spotted within minutes by social media folks. I mean, basically, he goes to play golf. I guess they don't shut the whole place down because it's a working golf course, and he owns it, and he doesn't want to miss out on money or make his members mad. So other people play. They're milling about the club. I suppose the Secret Service figures it's more or less secure there, and I'm sure it is. But within a couple of minutes of announcing, he might not play golf, he's really there for meetings, etc., someone had posted an Instagram picture, took a selfie of themselves, or had someone take their picture standing at the by some stairs, a staircase that Trump was making his way up. Of course, he's in golf attire and spikes. I think, the hat on and everything like that. So clearly he was there to play golf. I'm proud of him for taking the stairs. That's, I don't think there's an elevator I guess there probably is because of, handicapped access, but there must be, if not an elevator, a lift somewhere. But he decided to take the stairs like a big boy, and he made it up and presumably back down safely. So good for him. It's good to keep those joints exercising, keep your hips in shape. Balance is very important as you get older, and as you know, he is older, and that's a key. And Greg will tell you that's true. Make sure you work on that and do some yoga, I say. But don't listen to me. I'm not a doctor. Anyway, he made a visit to the golf course, a long one, on Saturday, which means he played golf there. And then he went back on Sunday It's not close, by the way, to the White House. It's not far away. I mean, for the president, it doesn't make a difference. It's a half-hour drive because you go by motorcade and nothing stops you. But, it's 35 miles or so, I would say, probably from the White House to Trump National, and not the easiest roads to take either. I don't know why he doesn't fly by helicopter, but that's too expensive. So good on him for saving money there. He went back on Sunday and, again, said he had meetings and phone calls. And this time he stayed for about 30 minutes. I think there was an actual time log. That's what, the press pool kind of does. And apparently he arrived at 11:04 and he was on his way. He was out of there at 11:37. And the press said, "What about your meetings?" And he said, I did them already. I had 3 meetings, 33 minutes, 3 meetings, 11 minutes each, obviously. Once again, Instagram to the rescue. Somebody wandering through the club says, "Oh my God, Trump is actually at the country club," and took a picture, and he's in the grill room watching Golf Channel on TV with 2 unidentified, I think to this point, unidentified dudes sitting at the table with him, and then, casually walking out. And it's okay. Honestly, taking a half hour off to watch the Golf Channel, who cares, right? It's the weekend, Sunday. I think most presidents are entitled to that. If he wasn't already always on permanent vacation, mentally or otherwise, I would say it's not a big deal. But of course, then to say I'm going to have the Secret Service drive me a half an hour out into Virginia so I can sit for half an hour and watch the Golf Channel, which I'm sure is available in the White House, talk to no one, say I talked to a bunch of people, and then drive a half hour back. I don't know. People were saying, did it rain? Did it rain this golf game out? It did not rain. There was no rain yesterday. Nobody predicting any rain yesterday. It didn't rain until after dark. I'm here. I'm in the neighborhood. I know. Speaking of being in the neighborhood and knowing, don't automatically, here's my warning to everybody who sees this stuff on social media. Don't automatically attack, Trump National Golf Club members who take social media pictures of the president, and no matter which side you're on. But, for our progressive friends who are watching, Trump National is a golf course an existing golf course that he took over. It's not something he built and that people would join because they love Donald Trump. I'm sure that will maybe, I guess, at some point become the case. But for years, it was Lowe's Island Golf Course. It's a community golf course. I mean, it's a privileged place to be sure, no doubt about that. And that will tend, I suppose, to attract people who might also be sympathetic to Donald Trump, but it's not necessarily the case. Like, for instance, yes, the one that took the picture of him in the grill room yesterday. This is huge news. Everybody needs to know this for like 10 minutes, right? The person who took the picture of him in the grill room, as it happens, is a local middle schooler, 6th grade kid whose family belongs to the club, and he was wondering, but by the way, what does that say about your security? Your random 6th grader from the neighborhood wanders into the room where the president's hanging out watching TV. Okay, I mean, I guess they trust their club members. That's something. That's an interesting thing. Anyway, I was going to say it's sort of a neighborhood club. When they developed this area, they built this Lowe's Island community, and they built the golf course in there. And basically, the idea was if you buy a home from the developers in the Lowe's Island or surrounding community, we'll give you a discounted rate on your initiation fee and I guess probably annual dues to the course. So it was for wealthier people, obviously. It's not a gated community or anything like that, but it was just like an idea they thought that would attract young professionals and not quite retirees who would be able to buy a nice house in the area and have a golf course nearby. And, it's a respectable course. All of a sudden, Donald Trump comes along and buys the thing. Now it's Trump National. So there's a lot of people who, I know a lot of people in the neighborhood who are kind of like, well, on the one hand, I want to resign because Donald Trump, and I don't want to pay him. On the other hand, I was here first. I saved a lot of money. I work hard. I bought a nice house. I got this discounted golf course rate, like I could live, the much wealthier country club lifestyle. And it's great to be able to go and play golf at a golf club and everything for a fraction of the price that would normally cost you to do that. I got to give it up because Donald Trump is a jerk. And some people have done it and some people have not. Not everybody in the neighborhood is a member either. It's something you got to opt for. But so anyway, I'm just saying, occasionally the people who take pictures of the president and circulate them on social media are the sixth grade, 12-year-old sons of people who 20 years ago said, I'll join the local golf course. Oh, crap, now it's a Trump. Well, what am I going to, I like golf. And I guess until he starts putting people in FEMA camps, I'll play here. So I don't know. Well, anyway, it was an interesting weekend. Interesting that he continues to deny how much golf he plays. It's apparently the one thing that actually embarrasses the guy, which is really fairly amazing. It's as amazing there as anything. But there's more news than just the fact that he is a lying, cheating, bad golfing son of a whatever. But I'm going to give you more about that later. But instead, for now, we'll give Greg Dworkin a chance to come back. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Hey, David. How are you?
How are the Yukon women doing?
Doing quite well. I think they play again today. And hopefully with this win, if they win, they'll be in the Final Four.
Have they ever been before?
Yeah.
Okay.
This will be their fifth attempt in a row to win the national championship. Let me put it this way. The last time they lost back-to-back games was 1993.
Wow. What happened?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Deflated the balls, probably.
Yeah, well, that was the year that they were rebuilding, and ever since then they've won a lot, they've lost a few, but they hardly ever lose two in a row.
They built something pretty good.
They did. And a fantastic team.
Yeah.
And they're fun. And, of course, it's all Connecticut has, so we all love them.
Yes, well, this year it's only have basketball-wise, but yeah.
It was a year that both the men and the women won.
Yes, that's true, and I don't think has anybody ever done that before. Besides,
I don't know,
Connecticut?
but we
That's
did.
a good question. It's a pretty good one. Women's tournament, big deal. I don't know why people, I guess I secretly know why people tend to ignore it, but I also saw news. South Carolina, in the men's side, I think is their first trip to the Final Four ever. And saw a lot of people commenting as they were saying on TV, this is South Carolina, their first trip to the Final Four, and people saying, not for the women, it isn't. They've been there before, but never mind that. Don't qualify. Okay, well, that's the sexual politics of basketball, and that's about all I know about it. So we can move on from there.
We can. There's some other stuff that happened as well. One of the big things, of course, was the whole debacle about the American Health Care Act, the Obamacare attempt at repeal, and I think we should spend a little time talking about that.
Right. We talked a little bit about it on Thursday because they were going to try it then, and then they didn't. Then we talked about it on Friday because they were going to try it then, and then after we got off the air,
they didn't.
So where are we now?
Okay, so here's the story. Let me just read to you, and this comes directly from the pundit roundup. It's like, my graphic that I put up there, and I just grabbed these screenshots from the Washington Post and New York Times.
Okay.
So let me read you some of the headlines here. Trump becomes ensnared in fiery GOP civil war. Ryan emerges from health care defeat badly damaged. Trump's obstacle to policy goals, his own missteps. GOP members who back Bill are left in lurch. Bill failed, the finger-pointing is only beginning, and the 33 Republicans who stopped the bill. That is just from the New York Times. And that 33 Republicans article is interesting because it was a mixture of conservatives, moderates, and people in the middle. Yes. Meaning that everybody had different reasons for not wanting the bill, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But that's just from the New York Times. Washington Post had health bill failure imperils Trump's congressional agenda. Why the Republicans were in such a hurry to reconfigure health care. Pence says Trump will keep promise of overhauling Affordable Care Act. We shall see. And Freedom Caucus isn't Ryan's only problem in the House anymore. A new dynamic may be emerging within the right and left flanks within the Republican Party, willing to buck their leadership, and we'll talk about that as well.
Right and left flanks. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, but Pence says Trump will keep promise of overhauling Affordable Care Act. That wasn't his promise. His promise was repeal, not overhaul. So they're already changing the goalposts because they have to. And those are just the headlines from the New York Times and Washington Post. A lot of the regional papers were equally difficult. For example, I got one here from And maybe I'll just send these over to you so that you can take a look at them too, because that's always fun.
Am I gonna have to recycle all this stuff?
Well, you know, so let's just send a couple of graphics over to you via Skype. And this is this one is from the South Bend Tribune. First one I'm going to send.
All right.
Which is huge failure for Trump and GOP.
Huge. We stopped saying that.
Right. And then this one is from the Dayton Daily News. GOP abandons healthcare plan. And then if you look down just a little bit further to the right, it says 2016 deadliest year for ODs, coroner reports.
Oh. Okay.
Don't forget, repealing Obamacare means getting rid of opioid dependence programs.
Doe.
So, yeah, they kind of go together. So, you know, you had all of this happening. Now, Tim Alberta writes this piece in Politico magazine called Inside the GOP's Healthcare Debacle, 18 Days That Shook the Republican Party and Humbled the President. And that all seems well and good. And he talks about the fact that we're talking about 1/5 of our economy. It's actually closer to a sixth, but that's okay. Doesn't matter one way or the other. Two Freedom Caucus members, Brian Babin, B-A-B-I-N, and Ted Poe, both of Texas, told the president they had switched to yes, but decisions had already been registered with the White House vote counters prior to sitting down with Trump. And their colleagues didn't like it, felt that these two were grandstanding. It turns out that Ted Poe quits the Freedom Caucus after this debacle and says, I want to be able to be independent.
Yes. Why does he hate freedom?
It's a great question. Basically, the Freedom Caucus wanted to act as a bloc so that they could influence what happens. The trouble with that is they don't have any policies of their own. And so that didn't work particularly well. And that's going to lend me a discussion here. This is by Dave Hopkins, who's a Boston College political scientist.
All right.
He writes a blog called Honest Graft, The Promise and Puzzles of American Politics. And the title is, Why Wasn't Obamacare Repealed? The answer is the party, not the president. In other words, it isn't a question whether Trump did it right or Ryan did it wrong or did it right, according to him. The National Party has become increasingly influenced the rights, if not controlled outright, by unelected activists and news media personalities who gained considerable internal power during the Obama years by constantly criticizing Republican office holders for insufficient ideologic loyalty. And so, although critics argue that the American Health Care Act, AHCA, a bill that was transparently pulled together in a matter of weeks with little expert input or elite support, ultimately failed because it was bad policy. And we'll talk about that because that's Harold Pollack's point. Maybe so, but we should be wary of the ensuing implication that a better bill would have stood a stronger chance. It's fair to criticize Ryan for the legislation that he drafted, but he presumably believed its provisions would best reconcile the conflicting demands of swing seat moderates and conservative purists. The congressional Republicans' increasingly apparent challenges in reaching internal agreement, which even Ryan was forced to acknowledge, doesn't bode well for the rest of the party's agenda. Up till now, the news media and Washington community has treated Trump's shocking ascension within the GOP as a more or less random event, the hostile takeover of an otherwise sound party apparatus. But it's time to devote much more serious consideration to the question of whether its existing internal dysfunction left the contemporary Republican Party uniquely vulnerable to Trump, or a Trump-led ambush. As any healthcare expert knows, an effective remedy for one's ills first requires a correct diagnosis. So basically, the Republican Party's rotten to the core. And the reason that Trump won is because they didn't have anything. And the reason that the Affordable Care Act was supposed to be supplanted by the American Health Care Act, the Ryan monstrosity, was basically because it was never meant to be in any way, shape, or form a health care bill. One could argue it was really a tax bill made to cut taxes for the rich. But everything in the bill was designed for horse trading. So this was all about politics, nothing about policy. And that's because that's what is required to pass anything in the GOP. And if that's the case, you get these elephant, or actually camel, I guess you should call bills, designed by a committee. A horse designed by a committee is a camel. Okay. And so you have this thing that a little bit here, a little bit there, some horse trading at the last minute, doesn't really matter what's in the bill. The whole concept that I think Paul Ryan had was get this thing passed, if you can, and then send it over to the Senate where somehow magically it passes, a miracle occurs. Then you get at committee, we talked about this last week on Thursday, at committee level you get to jigger it so that you get what you want out of it and at least you have something. And I think that was the basic design of what Ryan was doing. It was flawed from the beginning. It was a terrible bill policy-wise, and it turned out it was a terrible bill politically, partly because there's just nothing in the GOP that allows the extremists to agree with the moderates. And so for that reason alone, it failed. Then Harold Pollack has a different point of view. He's writing in Politico magazine over the weekend, and he writes, Paul Ryan failed because his bill was a dumpster fire. It was bad policy, not poor tactics or negotiating skills, that doomed the GOP's efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare. And he basically accuses Ryan of being unserious about policy. And he says, what's so baffling about Ryan's failure is he knows as well as anybody that social entitlements are devilishly hard to take away because people like them. As the main features of the Affordable Care Act became embedded in American life, overturning it required legislative craftsmanship at the boundary between coalition politics and policy, which is what Nancy Pelosi did. By comparison, Speaker Ryan's crafting was a slapdash enterprise, wild revisions up to the last moment in a vain effort to gain critical votes. And the more outlandish the process, the more I wondered whether the game plan was just for the House to pass something, anything, and let the Senate do the real work, as he comes to the same conclusion I do. Yeah. Several insiders told me the real action would be a totally different Senate bill, and whatever passed there would become the new law once the House assented.
That may be exactly what they had in mind.
But the funny thing is that you had a number of people saying, you know what? They put this together in 17 days. Obama took a year. Mm-hmm. Obama did it right. Remember, Obama shoved this down our throats?
Oh, yes.
Actually, in retrospect, he did it right. He took his time. Forget about all that stuff I said about him screwing up. That was just to win elections.
Yes.
And so this unseriousness about what you're actually talking about is at the root cause of why the bill failed. So what Harold says is, why did the Republicans fail? In a word, insincerity. Republicans had 7 years to do their own hard work to coalesce around a credible conservative alternative. They never did. They might have prepared the American public for whatever plan they chose, and I add they didn't. And they probably did that because they never really thought they had to. Yeah. So now you have what's left is nothing, absolutely nothing. And so that's Harold Pollack's view. And I'm just going to add one more, and that's Mike Consell. This is short. 4 lessons from the healthcare repeal collapse. 1, it's the GOP's fault, not Trump's, not Ryan's. President Rubio or President Jeb would have had the same exact problems with the same exact strategy. His second point is activism works. He always thought it did anyway, but look what happened with the town meetings and such. Universalism works, and what he means that no matter what else happens with the exchanges, Medicaid was going to get trashed, but it turns out that expansion of the program to people above poverty saved it, so when you do things for everybody, it's a good deal. And then finally, wonks get lost in their own echo chambers. And Mike Consell says, I don't do healthcare, but like many others, I was obsessed with it in past months. Reading everything is crazy to come into an argument that's already going, and seeing conservatives who are supposed to be the intellectuals convince themselves of the most absurd statements. Take this from AEI. The central focus of the Affordable Care Act, and in fact the central focus of many healthcare reform efforts, have been to decrease the number of Americans without health insurance protection. But this near-exclusive focus on health insurance is ironic because consumers generally are not all that interested in health insurance. Yeah, exactly. What they care about is better health and access to care. No, they don't. They want health insurance. They want to be covered when they're sick. Hello? And if you keep lying to yourself about what's going on, you're going to fail. That's the basic message here.
Yeah, well, they did. So I guess the message is pretty much right.
Yeah.
Well, it really was a spectacular thing. I don't know why AEI, I don't know why they convinced themselves to say that.
They do, because they can't tell the truth.
Oh. All right, well, that must be the reason.
All right, but I got a piece on that, too, in a minute. But before we get to that, let's talk about Paul Ryan a little bit.
All right. He's dumb.
Well, there's this Tim Alberta piece inside the GOP healthcare debacle. And he talks about what happened here. It's just fascinating. He's got this little anecdote here. He gets the House Freedom Caucus, Trump does, into the room.
Yes.
And they're asking him questions about the policy. Because they're political ideologues and they care about the policy most. They want to get rid of so many things that actually help cover people, but that's what they want. They figure it'll be cheaper and it's not the government's job to do it.
Okay.
Okay? So they're peppering Trump with all of these details about the American Health Care Act. And Trump says to them, forget about the little crap, although that's not the word to use. Trump said, according to multiple sources in the room, let's focus on the big picture here.
Yeah, that sounds leader-like.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then there's another anecdote as well. And I don't know if it's in this particular piece, but others have told it, about Steve Bannon coming in to the same group.
Yeah.
And telling them, guys, there's no debate here. You just have to vote for this because this is the bill. And we can't afford to have the president lose. Yeah. And one of the members, whose name escapes me, but I think was one of the senior Texas guys, with the white hair, presidential hair, says something along the lines of, the last person that told me what I had to do was my daddy. That was when I was 18. I didn't listen to him either. This is a bunch of crap, and you can't tell us what to do. And that's how the rest of the meeting went.
Sounds pretty good.
Right?
By the way, you should have listened to your dad.
You should have. But the point that Tim Alberta is making in terms of this article is that Trump is supposed to be the great salesman who doesn't know anything about policy.
Yeah.
Whereas Paul Ryan is the great policy wonk who doesn't know anything about salesmanship.
Yes.
And that's stupid.
And how about Bannon, who's supposed to be the big political genius and soothsayer, and his solution is, you have to, cause...
Right. So let me just read you some tweets that kind of summarize all of that, and then I'll come up for air and actually let David talk on his own show.
I don't care.
So this is Sam Stein writing, incredible to watch Republicans, Tom Cotton, for example, now praise the process by which Obamacare was passed.
Yes.
And this is a Cotton statement. It's a problem that addresses 1/6 of the country's economy, touches every American in a very personal and intimate way in 18 days. When the Democrats came to power in 2009, for 60 years at least, they had been pursuing a national health care system. They didn't introduce legislation for 8 months. They didn't pass it over a year of Barack Obama's first term. It went through public hearings, testimony, developed a fact-based foundation of knowledge. Obama traveled around the country, held town halls, he spoke to a joint session of Congress. I'm not saying we needed, he goes out and say this particular bill. But you watch Republicans say, oh, well, Obama did it right. Look the way we did it. And you scratch your head and say, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah, where'd they get this guy?
Right. Anyway, Tim Alberta, who wrote that piece that I was citing, has a tweet, and he says, I love this smug new meme on the left, mocking the idea that Ryan, who has chaired 2 committees and is speaker, doesn't understand policy. That comes from Paul Krugman saying so, because Krugman's been saying that for years. And it's not new.
Right.
Okay? So Dana Hool, our friend, says, I love the notions. It's new, smug, and a meme. Saying Ryan understands policy is a strong indication you don't.
In a way, yes.
Right? I'm no Krugman, but you don't have to be Paul Krugman to see Ryan is nothing but surface with no depth. So Dana wrote 6 years ago, the role exists and he was the least bad option, but he talks about the fact that Ryan doesn't understand that much about policy. Remember that time Ryan released the budget without numbers?
Oh,
and that didn't happen.
That's not a good one.
Remember when Ryan called his budget without numbers a marketing document? That happened too, and there's references in Dana's piece about those two things. So the policy wonk who talks about the budget being a marketing tool, that doesn't automatically make him a policy genius. And Jordan Weissman, who writes about economics for Slate, has a short tweet storm which kind of gets to that point. Same article is talking about Tim Alberta and the same comment about all you people on the left who are disrespecting Paul Ryan. He's a committee chair. He must know everything. So he says, look, first, it's not a new meme. The left has been calling Ryan out for a slapdash policy for almost a decade now and has a 2010 article where Paul Krugman called Ryan the flim-flam man. The Beltway crowd gets fooled again, this time by Representative Paul Ryan's plan for a major overhaul of federal spending and taxes. That's 10 years old. Then Jordan Weissman goes on to say, the point isn't that Ryan doesn't understand the mechanics of policy making. He can put a budget together, sure, but the roadmaps he built his reputation on were always fantasy documents with huge gaps, like how he'd pay for it, or how he'd pay for his regressive tax cuts. It doesn't take a policy genius to promise to cut taxes with unspecified discretionary spending, but he was treated that way, like a genius. The second he had to produce a real-world bill, the result was a bad joke that only got less funny with each amendment. Now, some people might say that nobody could have written a workable Republican health care bill, and maybe that's true, but other aspects of this process revealed what a joke the Paul Ryan Wonder Wonk myth always was. First, it's obvious to everybody who looked at the AHCA way before the CBO score that it was a disaster for the old. How obvious? Several days prior to the score, he wrote, the Republican health care plan is especially terrible for Trump voters. Someone who thinks carefully about policy might have anticipated it and tried to craft a bill that didn't victimize Trump voters. Ryan didn't, either because he didn't think or because his ideological blinders kept him from anticipating that people would be mad about it. And then there's the issue of the final bill. The ledge that went to the floor Friday was incomprehensible. Nobody who read the muddled legislative language could say exactly what it would do. Nobody had scored it. Conceptually, it sounded like a complete disaster for taxpayers. And he includes Nicholas Bagley writing from a lawyerly point of view, saying that you can't really make hide nor hair of it, and immediately it's going to go for challenge. And yet Ryan still pushed forward on it. Wonks typically care deeply about what their legislation will actually do. Ryan clearly did not. He cared about political expediency. So the left has said for years Ryan is an ideologue who made it a career pushing unworkable, half-baked white papers, and in his first chance to pass a major piece of legislation, it turns out to be unworkable and half-baked. Coincidence? You tell me. To anybody who actually got to the end of this thread, apologies for the 24 typos. Now you know my editor's pain. But the point is, this has always been true about Ryan, and that's why everybody unloaded on Tim Alberta.
All right, I think that's largely true. I like the way the last one summed it up. It's true. He's put out a lot of white papers, and that's, I guess, how he came to gain the reputation. But yeah, he's never implemented anything. And now that there was the possibility that he could, people took a look at what it would do and how it would score things, and or how it would affect different policies and how it would score budget-wise, and it was a mess, and there was no sense that he gave a damn one way or the other. That's amazing how that would happen that way. Just like the dirty hippies keep turning out to be right. It pisses me off.
Right. Jonathan Chait has an observation about Ryan's problem. He says conservatives disagree philosophically with the very concept of insurance as most Americans experience it. Insurance means spreading risk, which is a form of redistribution. Republicans postured against Obamacare from the left, announcing its high deductibles and premiums, promising a better, cheaper plan that would cover everybody. Of course, their plan inevitably did the opposite. All politicians overpromise, of course, but the Republicans did more than overpromise. They delivered a policy directionally opposed to the promise. It's not possible to write a bill that meets public standards for acceptable health insurance within the parameters of conservative ideology. It's barely possible to write a bill that meets public standards for acceptable within the parameters of liberal ideology. The form taken by Obama's healthcare reform will change over the decades, but its central triumph, creating a federal right to access to basic medical care, will never be taken away. They tried to take it away. It failed.
Yes, and that's the second time that theme has come up, and I recall pretty clearly the 2009 and early 2010 side discussion about it. Because when we were talking so much about, there were certainly things that we wanted to see included in the bill, or even a different direction to the bill. And there were quite a few people who pointed out, if we can get this thing through and establish it and get it on its feet, it really will become one of those things that, despite all the protests, despite the Tea Party, astroturfing, if we can keep this thing alive for just a couple of years, we're going to get to a point where people are going to say, I can't live without this anymore.
Right.
And it did. It worked.
It worked. Now, although I have more pieces, things like how Mark Meadows is being hailed as a hero back home in rural North Carolina.
Yeah, well, Stay there.
From Noam Levy in the Los Angeles Times about how the failure of the health care bill leaves Republicans running Obamacare and open the way for bipartisan changes and fixes. Same thing New York Times says. Some lawmakers now look to bipartisanship on health care. That's all true. But in the short time I have, I just want to bring up this article here, which I think is fascinating, from Scientific American. And the title is How the Science of Blue Lies May Explain Trump Support. Blue lies. Very particular form of deception that can build solidarity within groups. Essentially, a white lie is a nice one. Hey, that's a really nice home a radio studio you have there, David. I'm sure it's looks really professional and nothing ever breaks. Somebody visiting your home studio might say to you, and you might think to yourself, well, that's very kind of you to say so, Mr. Professional Radio Person, but that's not really the truth. It was just a very nice thing for you to say to me, right? I mean, they could say the same thing to me. They could say, well, Greg, you get on the radio every morning and, you sound really professional. Sounds like you've done your homework and you've been practicing this for a long time with a beautiful radio voice and a face for a radio to boot. And I might say, well, it's very kind of you to say that, but it's really, you're just being kind to me. That's a white lie.
All right.
We all do that. It's to socialize.
No, we don't.
It's to help people to make themselves feel a little better about themselves. Doesn't hurt anybody. We all do it. It's much better than we do this when we're 14 or 15. I'm going to tell you the absolute truth no matter what. And then we quickly learn that doesn't go very well. Doesn't get you a date.
True.
So those are white lies.
Okay.
And then we have the black dark lies like Trump tells to his Trump University people. He's basically scamming them. Yeah. But there's stuff in the middle, and those are the blue lies. Those are lies that are told that help your own individual group or tribe, maybe at the expense of everybody else, but they do help somebody. They help you. So if you tell this kind of lie, you'll, for example, say the trouble with Obamacare is that it helps all those other people who are undeserving, whereas everybody in my tribe are totally deserving, and therefore it's unfair, and that's why I hate it. That's a blue lie. And Trump voters tell themselves this all the time, aided and abetted by conservative radio and Fox News, where they get reinforcement in this. And so those sorts of things may help explain how, even with the debacle that just happened, why nobody blames Trump. He was just trying to help us. He was trying to help us at the expense of them. But that's not the point. You even have people in some of these articles who are saying, yeah, I know he lies. That's the point. I like that he does. He's gonna shake things up by lying.
Yes, well, he did.
Because now that you've shown him that he's lying, doesn't that change your mind about it? No, I like the fact that he's lying. Why? Because it's going to benefit my group.
I get it. Although I'll tell you, I need some more examples. I'll have to work on this one because I'm having difficulty. I'm just too good. I'm looking at that and I'm saying, I think I can tell the difference between the black ones and the blue ones.
Let me give you an example. In a 2008 study of 7, 9, and 11-year-old children, and when you're talking about Trump, it's very good to look at children. The first of its kind, Lee and colleagues found that children became more likely to endorse and tell blue lies as they grew older. For example, given an opportunity to lie to an interviewer about rule breaking in the selection process of a school chess team, many were quite willing to do so, the older ones more than the younger ones. The children telling the lie didn't stand to benefit. They were doing it on behalf of their school. This line of research finds that black lies drive people apart, white lies draw them together, and blue lies pull some people together while driving others away. You want a good example, concrete, of a blue lie that everybody can get? Defending Jerry Sandusky at Penn State if you're a Penn State graduate. That is your tribe. And you will accept almost any chance to spin the information if it benefits Penn State. It's not benefiting you personally.
I see.
But you're going to defend your tribe, in this case, Penn State. If you're a Penn State graduate, you don't want to hear about the fact that Joe Paterno looked the other way.
Yeah, I think I get the concept. Again, I'm here's another one where I'm running up against well, that's black. But I get the idea.
Forget about Sandusky, which is a black lie to say that he did anything decent.
I'm trying.
But look at the officials at Penn State who looked the other way. One of which was just convicted, by the way.
Right, because the lie was black. I don't know. I'm having difficulty with it. I know that there are such lies.
But look at the peripheral people. Look at the peripheral people who were doing a lot of the defending. They didn't know. They didn't know what the facts were. It's not a black lie. They just assumed that, defending Penn State trumps trying to find out what really happened.
I guess so. Okay, there we go.
Don't look. I mean, think of Spotlight and what happened.
What about the football
in Boston
players?
with the Catholic Church? It's not that there were some people who knew that priests were abusing children. Black lie. And there were other people that didn't know and took the position that they didn't want to know, and you shouldn't be looking.
I see. It's troubling, isn't it?
It is. But and the fact of the matter is, in both examples that I gave, Penn State and the Catholic Church in Boston, it's not going to last. You can't keep it up forever, but you can do it for a while. And so I step back and look and say, okay, this is a fascinating concept here. It does explain how the particular group, in this case Trump voters, could be resistant to information, and they themselves. Again, if you see them as all being black lies and not blue lies, it fits into the idea they're all irredeemable. They're all deplorable. And I'm looking at it from a different point of view, that there's some of them are, the ones who actually are doing the bad stuff. And the others who just don't want to hear it are not in the same basket. These are the ones that you and I have disagreed about in terms of whether you can ever approach them. And for right now, most of them are taking the approach that I don't want to hear any information that disturbs my view of what I have done, right? I voted for Trump, and I thought it was a good idea because I wanted it disrupted. You have a story, a pretty famous one at this particular point in time, of a woman whose husband was deported. Did you read that one?
Yeah.
She's a Trump voter.
Yep.
She said, I didn't think he was going to do that. I thought he was only going to deport the bad hombres. My husband isn't a bad hombre. I voted for him because I wanted to improve the economy. The economy's a mess where I am. And you'll have to suspend disbelief and accept that the economy for a certain group of people, those without a college education, is pretty bad. Even if in your area it's pretty good. So if you accept that and say, okay, well, she voted for economic reasons because she didn't really believe that he was going to deport her husband and other people, because she and many others didn't really believe that he was going to try to get rid of their health care in Kentucky. They truly didn't believe it. And so for those reasons, you have, a particular group of people who voted for different reasons and now all of a sudden find out I was wrong. But did they tell themselves they were wrong? Not yet. Eventually they will. But for right now, what does this woman and other people like her say? I'm not happy with this. Maybe I shouldn't have voted. They didn't say I should have voted for Hillary. I voted for the wrong person. They're not ready. They have to move from I voted for Trump to maybe I shouldn't have voted at all to eventually get to maybe I should be independent and not really, follow this particular populist kind of stuff. So it's a step-by-step process that a lot of people have to take, and some people aren't there yet. But it's all part and parcel of the bigger picture. And I think it's a fascinating, at least attempted explanation as to how people got to where they were.
I can, all right, well, it's a very interesting thing in terms of, as a reminder that there are different shades of something out there, of people who, who either weren't privy to the information or decided to, disallow themselves from believing such information. And I don't know. It's I can see that there's a gradation, but yet when it comes to the lies, and maybe it's because we're picking particularly egregious ones as the examples.
They give another one. How about Americans seem to accept the fact that our intelligence agencies lie in the interest of national security?
That
Can you
might
accept
be
that
easier.
one?
Yes. Like I'm having real difficulty.
That's a more neutral one.
I don't. I really like this or that about XYZ child molester. I want.
It's not that I like this thing about a child molester. It's that I don't want to believe that he's a child molester, and I don't want to hear any information that's going to change it.
I also don't want to believe it, but I do see that there's a black lie here. But I like these other ones. Maybe it's just changing the topic that underlies the whole thing. But yes, there's something. Well, whether intelligence agencies or even politicians will say, well, even if I don't think that they lie, or if I try to categorize something that really basically was a lie as somehow not a lie because the other side also did it or something like that. That seems to be, to me, easier to accept as a different shade. So
yeah, there's wider ones. Climate change is a hoax because our side is really into industry. Mm-hmm. Immigrants cause crime because we don't see ourselves as immigrants and we forgot our parents were. Whether they believe these falsehoods or not is debatable, says the article, and possibly irrelevant. The research to date suggests they see those lies as useful weapons in a tribal us-against-them competition that pits real America against those who would destroy it. That's basically their mindset, and that's why they see the world the way they do. Which Sarah Palin told us back when she was running with McCain. There's real America, and then there's the rest of you.
Yeah.
What's the definition of real America? My supporters. My tribe.
Sure. Well, I've seen that happen, certainly. And you see Armando couldn't help himself. He's already typing in the background. He wants to know if you're trolling him with this.
Yeah. I'm this entire radio show is subtweeting Armando, right?
Basically. He just sits home and ordinarily on regular radio, you just have to sit home and seethe. But in our radio, you get to send us messages.
You get to participate. Anyway, I think it's a really interesting article and a really interesting point of view in terms of how you get to the point where somebody like Paul Ryan, for example, pulling it back to something that's not as emotionally charged as child abuse at Penn State, or which is mine. It wasn't in the article. It's one I pulled up. How can Paul Ryan be seen as a policy wonk? Because he's our champion, and therefore he is.
Yes,
but what of all the times that, he had the chance to actually show his chops and he couldn't do it? Right. Well, I'm not going to believe that. I'm going to believe he is because he's ours.
And we never really got that opportunity. They never had they never stood the test, so you could continue to believe that if you wanted to.
But there you have it. Anyway, so you put all of that together, and if you tell this blue lie about Paul Ryan and make the point that he's a policy wonk when in fact he's really not, and he's not that good at what he does, and then you actually throw him in the arena and actually have him come up with a healthcare plan, and it turns out the healthcare plan is awful. And by the way, he's not even that good at politics, and he can't corral his own side because the GOP is just so fractionated. Then you get what happened on Friday. And that's how I wrap all of this up into one tight little ball for you and then say, okay, well, I'm done. It's your problem now to straighten out everything I just said. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. And welcome to Monday. You got another hour of the show in 10 minutes or so, and we'll see where all of this stuff takes you. There's other things you might want to talk about. You might want to talk about this more. I don't know. I got this one here. Trump wants to reorganize the executive branch. Good luck with that. That's in monkey cage. I got this one here in The Independent. Donald Trump's team wiping their electronic devices in anticipation of giving evidence, which, by the way, is illegal.
Yes.
But, all sorts of stuff you might want to talk about. We'll see where you take the show.
Yeah, okay. Well, we will take a look at that. They're pulling all kinds of stunts there in the administration. In addition to that, I understand they now have staffers calling reporters. I saw this one tweeted this morning, calling reporters to ask, has anybody been calling you to leak bad information about me?
Right. I have to spend more time checking on what people are saying about me.
Yeah.
Than I do about anything else.
Because they're all they're job hunting. Right. They know this isn't going to last.
Anyway, so the report was from Andrea Mitchell where she said that White House staff is expecting subpoenas, and why not?
Why not? I expect them myself.
Yeah, I expect them to have them. By
the way, I guess one more thing before you do go, since you were pointing out the graphics of the front pages about the healthcare. Did you happen to see? Did you or maybe you pulled them from this tweet storm? Casey Clemens, who I'm not familiar with, but you should get familiar. Casey Clemens put together this fantastic 50-state roundup of headlines. I guess Casey, a former campaign worker for Hillary Clinton, among others, put together this thing over the weekend where he just literally went state by state and showed the front pages with screaming headlines about the health care bill.
Other people were retweeting it, and I saw those too, and just wanted to pull them as examples. But send me any of the links, and maybe I can storify it and put it together.
I think he's I don't know whether he's storified it, but you know how people thread these things together. I'll send you the first one. He put together a fun GIF graphic to lead the whole thing off, and then just state by state showed you what everybody was waking up to. It was really
and they were not waking up to great news.
No.
So again, so how do the Trump voters in these particular states react to seeing this kind of news? And the answer is they'll lie to themselves about it. That's really what I was saying.
Here, I'll send you this, and now I'll return the
Thank
favor.
you.
There you go. I'll send it to you over Skype. You can check it out. I'll retweet it for everybody else, too, and include it in the roundup. Thanks very much, Greg.
Yep.
Definitely
Take care,
appreciate
and
it.
I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Will do.
Alrighty.
Good day.
Bye.
All right. See ya. Let's see. Where to go with the rest of the day? I don't know. I retweeted that thing. Can I? Yeah, I guess if I'm not doing it on my phone, I can retweet it again. On my desktop will allow me to retweet the same thing multiple times. Whereas my phone says if you've retweeted it once and you hit the retweet button again, it unretweets your first one. I don't even know how it does that. All right. Anyway, let's see. What other things can we gather? There's a million different directions to go in. Let me make sure Pocket is up and available. Some of the things I have are like truly important. Some of the things I have are not truly important. Most of the truly important stuff we should cover, but it's also likely that you've heard, read, discussed things about it. So I feel like sometimes the minutia fills in the gaps a little bit in a more interesting way. I don't know. I started off this morning with Donald Trump and his stupid golf habit and golf course. I want to add something to that. I know it's dumb, but it's local interest to me. And also I think it fills in a certain gap. Well, it wasn't a gap. Donald Trump is a lying jackass and a total dick. Is that a gap for any of you? If not, forgive me for being repetitive about this. But this is, I don't know, another illustrative story. Here it is. I don't remember who tweeted it yesterday, but dead on. I could dig up who tweeted it too, if I scroll enough. But it was somebody very smart and capable, I'm sure. And I'll see about finding the original. Anyway, it was a New York Times article from November of 2015. So by that point, Trump is in the game, right? But I guess I don't remember the date on which the Lowe's Island Club switched over and reopened as Trump National. But this article is about that opening, and I don't know. I mean, I don't think it was as late as November of 2015, but I guess it was around that time. I would have guessed 2014 or so. Anyway, in 2015, they're doing this article about that club and its opening. So I don't know whether the date tells you exactly when it switched over. But anyway, in renovation of golf club, Donald Trump also dressed up history is the headline. The New York Times piece by Nicholas Fandos, and it is dateline November 24, 2015. Okay, ready? When Donald J. Trump bought a fixer-upper golf club on Lowe's Island here, the dateline, of course, being in the locality, Sterling, Virginia, bought a fixer-upper golf club on Lowe's Island here for $13 million in 2009. He poured millions into reconfiguring its two courses. And this is important, he angered conservationists by chopping down more than 400 trees to open up views of the Potomac River. And he shocked no one by renaming the club after himself. And that's true. That would have shocked no one. The 400 trees thing, by the way, it's a big thing in a lot of places. In Washington, we got a fairly significant concentration of arrogant millionaires and billionaires who buy properties for themselves along the river because it's beautiful and it's lovely to see a lovely river out your back window. But there are these stupid trees in the way, and I want to cut them down so that I can see the beautiful river. Of course, when you cut down 400 trees along the beautiful river becomes less beautiful because the trees do the job of retaining the soil, so that when the river runs by, it doesn't just erode the river banks and pull all that dirt into the river and make a brown, muddy mess out of the beautiful river you like. But they don't understand that. And typically, that's just indicative of so much. This is why like so many wealthy Republican types, if they're if they're ideologically opposed to ecological conservation in the first place, who cares? Chop down the trees. I know, I understand inherently. Trees, they're lovely. They maybe they even know they hold the soil. Maybe not. They make oxygen. Everyone loves them. But the thing is, these 400 aren't going to make a difference for the planet. I want to see the river. And I don't think that they think as far as, root systems, hold the soil in place, anti-erosion, etc. Even if they don't care what color the river is, they don't think things like, now I'm going to have to build a $100,000 retaining wall because the shoreline on my property keeps caving in, and every time that caves in, I own less property, and that's troublesome. But I guess they just don't believe in that kind of cause and effect, or that far removed, and that's why they have trouble with things like global warming and climate change. Anyway, he wants to chop down to 400 trees. He's not the only one. The other guy, the other jerk, I guess previously the biggest dick in the Washington, D.C. area was the owner of the Washington Breadsticks football team, Dan Snyder. And he did the same thing. Well, likewise, these guys make $1 million. They want to buy themselves a beautiful place along the river. He did the same thing. And he also, likewise, and there's law about this and codes and everything, and you're not supposed to do this because it's effing up the river for everybody else. Meanwhile, by the way, downriver, there's another millionaire who also likes his property and likes to look at the river and doesn't mind looking around or through trees so long as the river's clean, and he's not chopping down those trees. And upriver, your neighbor chops down the trees, and suddenly your river's all brown, even though you've been doing all that you can to clean it up, and what you value is a clean one. So it's kind of screwy that way. But that's the tragedy of leaving the commons in the hands of these selfish idiots. Anyway, so it's happened around here before. So everyone was on the lookout for it. And once again, Donald Trump one-ups everybody in that everybody says, okay, but remember, don't chop down the trees. We already had a jackass millionaire do this. Don't you do that. I'm not gonna chop them all down. So there we have it. He's ruined this area of the Potomac River and everything downriver from it as well. But don't worry, he'll just build the big retaining wall and fix it up for himself anyway. And then he'll have views of the Potomac River. By the way, another great feature of having those trees along the Potomac River, your slice on the holes bordering the river and heading up the river, or hook as the case may be if you're on the other course going the other way, they had a chance of hitting a tree and not going into the river, but now they don't. So hit them straight. And that's not, okay, so an honest challenge in golf. But trees are a part of the game, not for this guy. So he chomps down to 400 trees. That's terrible. It pollutes the river. Everyone told him not to do it. He did it anyway. But it comes back into play in a weird way. And they don't even really, I think it's the subtext of this article. I'll bring it out because the regular text of the article is kind of shocking enough because it goes on from here. That wasn't enough. Mr. Trump also upgraded its place in history. That is the land on which the club is built. What the hell does that mean? Between the 14th and 15th tee of one of the club's two courses, Mr. Trump installed a flagpole on a stone pedestal overlooking the Potomac, to which he affixed a plaque purportedly designating, quote, the River of Blood. And the plaque apparently reads, many great American soldiers, and that's pure Trump right there, many great American soldiers, both of the North and South. They're great, they're wonderful, they're terrific, they're huge, they're world-class soldiers, everyone loves them. Between the 14th and 15th tee, many great American soldiers, both of the North and South, died at this spot. Not necessarily between the 14th and 15th tees, but that's where he put the flagpole. This spot, he meant the Lowe's Island area. They died at this spot, the inscription reads. The casualties were so great that the water would turn red. It either did or it didn't, but he says it would. When? You know when the water turned red, by the way? When you chopped down 400 trees and the red clay soil that was being retained by their roots seeped into the Potomac River, the water turned red. The River of Blood. But he says it's something else. The casualties during the Civil War were so great that the water would turn red and thus became known as the River of Blood. And he doesn't actually go ahead and say that it's during the Civil War. He just thinks that you'll understand what they mean. What war? When did soldiers die here? It must have been the Civil War. Look, many great American soldiers, both of the North and South, died at this spot. Now, stop for a second and just say, had this been the case, I mean, if this were the final resting place of hundreds of great American soldiers, so many that there was a river of blood, is right here. Do you think a golf course is the thing that they want? Did they really want you to bulldoze their bones and make the 14th tee box? No. But then again, don't worry about, poltergeist anytime soon at Lowe's Island, because it didn't happen. By the way, we're not done with the description of the plaque. The inscription beneath his family crest, as though that had something to do with it, and above Mr. Trump's full name, concludes, "It is my great honor to have preserved this important section of the Potomac River!" ! Then Donald J. Trump. Like many of Mr. Trump's claims, the inscription was evidently not fact-checked. But here we go. Nuh-uh, no way. Nothing like that ever happened here, said Richard Gillespie, the executive director of the Mosby Heritage Area Association, a historical preservation and education group devoted to an 1,800 square mile section of the Northern Virginia Piedmont, including the Lowe's Island site. The only thing that was remotely close to that, Mr. Gillespie said, was 11 miles up the river at the Battle of Ball's Bluff in 1861, a rout of Union forces in which several hundred were killed. The River of Blood? Nope, not here. Didn't happen. Wasn't no such thing. Made it up. Just made it up. Mr. Gillespie's contradiction of the plaque's account was seconded by Elena Blumenthal, the curator of the Loudon Museum in nearby Leesburg, a third local expert who said he had written to Mr. Trump's company about the inscription's falsehoods and offered to provide historically valid replacement text, insisted on anonymity because he did not want to cross the Trump organization by disclosing a private exchange. And the piece is illustrated with a picture of the flagpole and the stone base, and here's the plaque. The River of Blood. So it is. In a phone interview, now, okay, he made up this battle. Okay, well, right. Like, for one thing, if it had happened, this would sort of be a desecration of the site. But you see what's going on here? The subtext of this is, I'm being accused of having destroyed this section of the Potomac River. I cut down 400 trees. They told me specifically not to do it, and I did it anyway. I destroyed this part of the Potomac River. That's what local activists say about me. What I want is the opposite. I want people to say I preserved this section of the Potomac River. Of course, the activists are talking about the actual river, the water itself. The water quality is what you destroyed. The ecosystem is what you destroyed. So what he says is, well, I can't redo that, and I don't want to anyway. So he says, what I'll do is I'll make up a historical event. I'll put it here. I'll put the plaque up, and the plaque will not only, it won't, if I just put up a plaque that says, I declare that I saved this part of the river, there's no particular reason to believe that. And that's, I mean, I guess he probably just wanted to do that. I saved this part of the river, but if I confuse the facts, if I confuse ruining the physical layout of the river, the physical and the water quality of the river, and preserving the historical importance of this section of the river. Never mind that this section of the river has no such historical importance. There might be other kinds of historical importance, but it's not this one. But this is the kind that people recognize as important. If, for instance, later on it explains that there was a river crossing area there. There was a ford. But, I mean, that's not something that goes, wow, you know, people used to ride their horses across this river here because it gets kind of shallow. Well, that's really super amazing. That doesn't really strike people as historical significance. But I know a battle, civil, and what kind of battle? Civil War battle. We'll have one right here. It's Virginia. Everyone will believe that. So he decides he'll make up a story about it. And because I put a plaque here declaring it to have happened, I'm preserving the historical importance of this section of the river. So I am preserving this section of the river, not destroying this section. Everyone who says I'm destroying it is wrong. Here's the plaque that says I'm preserving it. I'm preserving the history and not the physical river, but it's also not really the history. But so what? I mean, that's basically the trick he's trying to pull here. And it's really rather amazing. So, okay, what else do we need to know about this? You got it. I told you he was being a dick, but I'm not done. It gets worse. He's a bigger dick about this than I've already described. So here's how it goes. In a phone interview, Mr. Trump called himself a big history fan. I'm a big fan of history. I love your work, the way it recorded deeds and activities throughout time and the various things that happened. A big fan of that. Big fan of history. But he deflected, playing down, and then simply disputed the local historian's assertions of historical fact. He gets called out, and this is what he says. First, something salvageable. Then he goes off the edge. That was a prime site for river crossings, Mr. Trump said. So, if people are crossing the river, now that's fine, right? Okay, there was a river ford right there. So he says there was a river crossing here. So that's history. Yes, but you said there was a great Civil War battle. Well, he goes on. So look, if people are crossing the river and you happen to be in a civil war, I would say that people were shot. A lot of them. That's the quote of his excuse for this stuff. But no battle happened here. Well, listen, there was a river crossing here, right? Yes, that part we're willing to admit. That's historically accurate. There was a river crossing. Well, if you're crossing a river in a war, what happens? People are very, jealous about who crosses the river because it's got enormous strategic value. So what are you going to do to try to stop people from crossing the river? In a civil war, you shoot them. It stands to reason. People cross the river, you would shoot them. How many of them? A lot of them, because armies. And so therefore, boom, that's literally it. That's the quote. This was a prime site for a river crossing. So if people are crossing the river and you happen to be in a civil war, I would say, no one else would say, history wouldn't say, facts don't say it, but I would, that there were people shot. Not only were there people shot, it was a friggin' river of blood. Okay? It was huge. It was gigantic. It was tremendous. There was so much blood, your head will spin. That's it. That's the whole thing. Now, there's more discussion about it. The club does indeed lie a stone's throw from Rousers Ford, R-O-W-S-E-R, Rousers Ford, which you can look up and learn about because there's a link in here. Rousers Ford, where as an official historical marker notes, an official one that has the real actual endorsement of historians, at that place, General Jeb Stuart led 5,000 Confederate troops, including cavalry, across the Potomac en route to the Battle of Gettysburg. It did happen nearby. But no one died in that crossing, historians said, or in any other notable Civil War engagement on the spot. I would say that if you have a river crossing and you happen to be in a Civil War, people are going to get shot, a lot of them. You know why? You want to know why that doesn't happen? If you're a general and you're thinking about leading 5,000 troops across the river at this site, what sort of thing do you do as a general before saying, everybody into the water? One of the things you do is scout and secure the whole area, preferably on both sides. You don't want to fight your way across the water. You don't want anybody sniping at your troops from nearby bluffs. You want to be sure that this is going to, if you're leading 5,000 troops and cavalry across the water, you can't do it under withering sniper fire or outright, give people straight ahead volleys. You don't want any cannons firing at your guys. while they're crossing the river. Rivers are the kind of barriers that will kill your army, the whole thing. If you cross it without being sure what's on the other side and whether there are people going to be shooting at you from one side or the other. That's why it was a prime river crossing site. You can cross the river in a lot of places, but if there's guns overlooking it, that would be a prime river crossing site if you're on the side that the guns are on. That is to say, they're on your team in the Civil War, no matter what side of the river they're on. But if there's guns around and the crossing is contested, that's a terrible river crossing site. You don't do it. But, I'm sure people made certain mistakes. But where they did, it was so incredible that they put up a marker here saying, can you believe how many people got killed here? Also, I guess, if you're not from the area, I guess you won't necessarily guess it. But if you're in the Northern Virginia area and more than 6 people got killed there during the Civil War, there's a sign already, I promise you. Nobody's discovering slaughter fields, killing fields at this stage of the game on the Civil War here in Northern Virginia or anywhere else, I don't think. Anyway, what do I know? I'm not a historian. So, no one died at that crossing, the 5,000 Confederates crossing on their way to Gettysburg. They died later. Very big success. It was. But get this. There's still more dickishness. This is why I'm lingering on this for so long. No one died in that crossing or in any other notable Civil War engagement on that spot. So what does Trump say to that? Right? Now he's caught. No. He says, how would they know that? That's his answer. Quote, how would they know that? Or how would they know that? Depending on where you want to lay the emphasis on that. Mr. Trump asked, when told that local historians had called his plaque a fiction. Were they there? That's it. There's no such thing as history. How would you know that? Were you there? Abraham Lincoln, he was the first Republican. Many people don't know that. How would you know that? Were you there? It's just a fact. Everybody knows it. Well, this is just a fact. Not everybody knows it, but it's just a fact. Mr. Trump repeatedly said that numerous historians had told him, this is a quote, numerous historians, unquote, had told him that the golf club site was known as the River of Blood. But he said he did not remember their names. Because one of the really crazy things about historians is they hardly ever write any facts down about things, including about themselves. So I can't remember any of their names, even though that's the prime motivator, essentially, of history. I'm a big history buff. I just can't remember any of the names. Even of the guys who told me the history. But okay, people don't consider that to be history, the name of the guy who told me that, right? I can't remember any of their names. Then he said the historians had spoken not to him, but to, quote, my people. My people. But he refused to identify any underlings who might still possess the historians' names. And then he gets angry. You know what? Write your story the way you want to write it, Mr. Trump said finally, when pressed unsuccessfully for anything that could corroborate his claim. You don't have to talk to anybody. It doesn't make any difference. But many people were shot. It makes sense. That's it. He wants them to have been shot. In its small way, the plaque bears out Mr. Trump's reputation for being preoccupied with grandeur, superlatives, and his own name, but less so with verifiable facts, even when his audience is relatively small. Members of what he renamed the Trump National Golf Club and some former employees said the plaque generally drew laughter or eye rolls, much as when Mr. Trump periodically descends from his helicopter to walk one course or the other. One member, a former history professor and co-author of 4 Civil War novels, called the monument merely strange. Much more important, he said, were the much-needed renovations Mr. Trump made to the golf course. I am not going to lead a demonstration over this, said the member. What? That's the member? Newt Gingrich? Is that really? Okay, that's funny. Well, he calls it merely strange. So that's it. A former history professor. And I would dispute that, by the way, if you're talking about Newt Gingrich. So that's it. It's merely strange. And he says, I am not going to lead a demonstration over this. No surprise about that. Said Newt Gingrich. Wow, I didn't even notice this yesterday. The former House Speaker, of course. It's a country club with a golf course, for Pete's sake. I know. And I know I shouldn't have spent this kind of time on it. It was amazing to me, one, the lengths to which he would go to, improve the reputation of the golf course. But two, the ecological disaster. Three, the flim-flam, the switcheroo. I preserved this river. I didn't destroy it. I preserved it. How come I preserved it? Because it's a historical site. Never mind that this piece of history never happened here. It's just, there you go. All right, well, you know what? It didn't happen here, and that matters. History matters. It didn't happen. Well, how do you know? Were you in history? Well, not that history, but yes, I was. Rather amazing, and it actually goes together, believe it or not, with a couple of other articles that we have. There was something I saw tweeted, Irene Carmon, I think, happened to have tweeted this thing out. I did put it away, did I not? That basically talks about, why Donald Trump is such a liar. And it reminded me a great deal of something we actually read during the campaign, and which I think I dredged back up somewhere, and I thought I had put alongside the this article so that we could read it at the same time, but maybe not. Maybe I'll have to find it again, unless this was it. Let me just no, that isn't it either. Okay. Well, anyway, here's the one I found or saw over the weekend that Irene had. Oh yeah, okay. I found the other one here that had sent around. This one from the New Republic, and a disgusting picture of Donald Trump back from the old days when his ties were shorter than his belt buckle, like the 80s, standing outside a Trump Tower making a grandiose gesture. Why is lying so easy for Donald Trump? Ben Adler wrote this piece, and it's subtitled, "For New York developers, blatant deception isn't just good for business, it's completely legal." This was an interesting insight. Again, it's not the news, it's just insight for your week, for your year, for the next 4 years, if he makes it that long. And the news I'm not giving you, and which I'm sure they will cover to some extent on the after show following this program, is the reason why he probably won't last that long. The real stuff, but we have to wait a while to really figure out what the hell's going on with the Russia stuff. God, that stuff is crazy. Let me tell you this crazy bit. Political pundits, staggered by Donald Trump's exaggerated boasts, false promises, and outright lies, have offered various theories for what's wrong with him. Does he suffer from mental illness? I believe that's probably the case also. Is he experiencing early onset dementia? Some of that. Andrew Sullivan recently argued in New York Magazine that Trump's chronic stubborn dishonesty, unlike normal political fibbing, is delusional and deranged, a frightening sign that the president is living in an alternative universe. There is no anchor anymore, Sullivan writes. At the core of the administration of the most powerful country on earth, there is instead madness. And there is an argument to be made for that. But such dramatic theories miss the simplest explanation for Trump's lying. He's a real estate developer from New York City. Lying isn't a personal failure, it's a business model. And that may be true. And I, by the way, wouldn't necessarily limit it to real estate. But there is a very curious quirk about real estate, which Ben explains here. New York real estate, where Trump first learned the art of the con, is a line of work that's built on chicanery. Under state law, real estate developers have a de facto legal license to lie, and they use it with abandon. The marketing materials for a luxury condo, anybody who markets luxury condos, might advertise top-flight amenities, on-site Soul Cycle, say, or valet stroller parking. And some of these are not so far removed from reality. But buyers have no legal recourse after they move in and discover that they have to haul their strollers up 6 flights like a tenement dweller. As a matter of New York law, only the final sales contract is binding. And with land values so high and profit margins so slim, developers have every incentive to hype the sales pitch. Real estate investors sell their products, and in the process, they promise it will have benefits that may not ever be realized, says Thomas Angotti. I don't know whether he says Angotti. I guess no, without the I-O. Angotti. A-N-G-O-T-T-I. A professor of urban planning at Hunter College and author of New York for Sale. Or, as one real estate broker and property manager in New York puts it, quote, Everybody in this business is a effing liar. I think you buried the lead there, Ben. That's pretty good. Well, okay. That guy for president, he tells it like it is. Bait and switch tactics are an everyday practice in Trump's industry. The real estate mogul Bruce Ratner dangled star architect Frank Gehry before city officials when seeking approval for the arena that would anchor his enormous Atlantic Yards development in downtown Brooklyn. Once the deal was in place, however, Gehry was booted off the project and a cheaper design was swapped in. Now that seems fraudulent, don't you think? And more than 4 years after the arena opened, local residents are still waiting for the 8 acres of parks that Ratner pledged to create. That sounds familiar. To win approval for taller luxury high-rises, developers frequently agree to provide courtyards or other amenities for the public to enjoy. Then they save money by cutting corners on construction, making the spaces so inaccessible or unwelcoming that no one wants to use them. That rings a bell, too. And it takes us back to the Occupy days and Zuccotti Park. And how is it that you can expel people from this? And remember that that's one of those public-private spaces that the building in the area wanted a variance so they could build higher and more floors and make more money than zoning would permit. But the zoning board said it's okay if you create a park that the public can use. So they created this Zuccotti Park, but they sort of semi-control it. It's only half private. And another example comes up, one that you probably thought of more readily, comes up in this next paragraph or so. But moving on here, if you're maximizing profit, you're going to invest the minimum amount of money into what gets you the most benefit, says Eric Goldwyn, a professor of urban studies at Barnard College and Hunter College. They got the market cornered, these guys. If it happens to be a trapezoid courtyard between two buildings that no one can really use, who cares? The public agenda isn't what they're really looking to do, which is just to satisfy the zoning requirement. Trump is well versed in the dark arts of the New York mega developer. In 1979, he got the city to approve 20 extra stories for Trump Tower. And then he lied about how many, even then, right? Let me have 20 extra stories. Sure, fine. I'm going to tell everybody it's 34 extra stories. They said, as long as it's not actually 34, go for it. But okay. He gets 20 extra stories for Trump Tower by creating a 4th floor, quote, public garden that is almost never open. He also replaced the lone bench in the public lobby. Remember how that the lobby of Trump Tower is public? And he kept closing it for rallies, and that was a big deal. Why was it public? It was public because it was made public in exchange for, in part, the extra 20 stories. But he replaces the lone bench in the public lobby with what? In this case, kiosks selling paraphernalia from his presidential campaign and The Apprentice. Last summer, after losing a series of administrative decisions by the city, Trump returned the bench, right? He lost even that. I don't lose in court. Well, you lost that. Well, I'm going to win on the Muslim ban. No, you lost on that too. His now infamous habit of stiffing contractors is common among developers. Trump has also lied to preservationists, like the ones along the golf course up here, he's got other stuff, promising to preserve Art Deco friezes on the facade of the Bonwit Teller department store building that he demolished to make way for his Trump Tower. When he realized it would take 2 weeks to remove them undamaged, he instead jackhammered them to pieces. Kate Wood, president of the preservation advocacy group Landmark West, says New York developers sometimes destroy architectural features on an old building to prevent it from being subjected to landmark status. And she has seen developers understate the likely revenue of new buildings when trying to get permission to build them. Some falsely claim that certain floors will be used for community instead of commercial purposes. It kind of comes down to alternative facts, says Wood. There are facts that we in the public and nonprofit advocacy sector see, and there's how developers see the world. Given that real estate developers are mainly salesmen to investors, customers, local officials, and neighborhood advocates, lying is basically their job. But even among his fellow developers, Trump excelled at misdirection. In a deposition in 2007, when Trump sued a journalist for reporting on unflattering truths about his business practices, lawyers caught Trump in 30 separate lies. He inflated the price of membership at one of his golf clubs, the fee he received for giving a speech, the magnitude of his past debts, so that it could look like he came out of a bigger hole successfully, right? The size of his stake in a partnership, the number of sales at a condo building, and the number of his employees. In real estate, as Trump knows, there is no detail unworthy of exaggeration, like at the golf course. Those who enter politics from other walks of life often confront the stereotypes associated with their new chosen profession. Or their old one too, in this case is what they're talking about here. John Edwards was caricatured as a sleazy ambulance chaser because he was a plaintiff's attorney. Mitt Romney as a heartless private equity predator because he was one. But Trump somehow managed to present his background in one of the world's shadiest and most dishonest occupations as a credential rather than a liability. This, at heart, is the secret to his political success. He found a way to apply the shameless ethos of his old profession to the demands of his new one. I try and be truthful, Trump explained in his deposition in 2007, sounding like a kid who wants to be graded on effort rather than accuracy. Then, in an eerily prescient moment, he drew a straight line from his professional lying to his bigger ambitions. I'm no different, he confessed, from a politician running for office. Very interesting way of looking at things. And it did, like I said, remind me of something that we had read during the campaign, which I do now find I have close at hand. This piece from almost a year ago, April 8th, 2016. And this was the piece by the local director of planning for the city of Alexandria, Farrell Hammer, I guess, retired in 2014 as director of planning for the city of Alexandria. This was a piece, an opinion piece entitled "Building Developers Are Reactive and Megalomaniacal, Just Like Trump." Do you remember this one? Maybe it'll ring a bell for you. The guy says, I spent 30 years as a city planner in the D.C. area, and a big part of my job was meeting with developers. Over time, I created what I call the developer profile to entertain my staff. If you want to understand Donald Trump, start here. Of course, I would never say all developers are like this, parenthetically, but they are. They have short attention spans. I'm going to read this thing because it'll remind you of it, but also it rang true in April of 2016, but now, of course, we have, I was going to say the benefit of the additional time with Donald Trump, but the problem is that much of this time he's been president-elect or president of the United States, and there's no benefit to that at all, but you get my point. So, they have short attention spans. They're terrible listeners. They come to meetings to negotiate the fate of a project, and they can't sit still. They rock and jiggle while you talk to them, waiting for you to finish. Then they say their piece and leave. There's no dialogue. They go to the golf course. They're out of there. They don't read. Where have we heard that one? They don't read. We thought that was like amazingly unique to Donald Trump. No, they don't read. Sending a letter or an email is useless. You have to pick up the phone and talk to them. And that's exactly what we learned. First of all, that he's a television addict. Second of all, he's a telephone addict. No one can, they can't stop him from gabbing with his old friends by cell phone, even in the middle of the White House, even in the middle of the day. They view themselves as victims. Hello. They see regulations as getting in the way of what's good for economic development and society as a whole, and they believe governments exist to pick on them. Everything they do is for us, because they are building places for us to live, shop, or work. And it's true, developers play an important role in the growth and revitalization of cities, so they're not just victims in their minds, but heroes too. Risk just doesn't bother them the way it does other people. We'll use some nukes. What's the point if you can't use them, right? You can really lose your shirt as a developer. The good side of this risk tolerance is that developers are decisive and can take bold action. The scary side is that they sometimes brush aside legal obstacles to what they see as a worthy goal. They know the difference between right and wrong, but often they aren't particularly worried about the letter of the law. While tactically inventive, they are strategically unimaginative. They're not people who enjoy creative thinking or the big picture. They'll build the same building over and over, but they are endlessly flexible about achieving each project. It's all about the next step. In negotiations, they're willing to get only part of what they want because they know they're going to come back and get another part and another until before you know it, they have it all. They're into getting their nose under the tent. Because they concentrate on immediate tactical goals, you can't expect consistency of arguments from them. They're extremely pragmatic. They have no interest in ideology. They value loyalty over principle. You're either in the circle or you're not. And they're usually generous to loyal friends of every race and gender. The ones at the top are driven, expansive people. And since they identify their projects with the general social welfare, they tend to be a little megalomaniacal. Almost any attention you give them is good. They don't mind being teased, but pointed criticism is unacceptable. That might sound contradictory, but it's the way they are. What does this tell us about what Trump would be like as president? Remember, this is April 2016. Perish the thought at that point, right? The developer's profile can give us a pretty good idea. Let's see how he does. On those few issues he identifies closely with, such as trade and restricting immigration, he would be unrelenting and inventive. And I think inventive, well, okay. You might, yeah, I guess you'd be stuck with that word. Not in a good way, it's a bad way. Unrelenting, yes, I think we've seen that. He really would build a wall. He can't keep Muslims out of the United States or return lost jobs to the country, but he would do what he can and call it a success. And that's sort of kind of basically what all he's been able to accomplish on the Muslim side. He keeps getting shot down, but he says it's a huge success. On many other issues that a president deals with, Trump is perfectly unqualified now and would stay that way. He is a quick study, but only about things that interest him. He would rely on staff, which is probably good, except he doesn't have any, depending on who's around him. In foreign policy, he would have little strategy. He would play the victim, be reactive and unorthodox. Being risk-tolerant, he may do things that are truly dangerous. Being willing to cut losses, he would be more likely than other presidents to leave allies in the lurch. The positive side of having no strategy is that he's not an ideologue. On many issues, Trump would govern as a pragmatist. Can't govern at all, though. I doubt he's a racist. Developers don't care if you're black or white, but he has become the candidate of racists, which presents him with a problem. How does he satisfy this constituency without turning the rest of the country against him? I don't know if I doubt he's a racist anymore, but okay. This is the sort of difficulty you get into if you act for short-term tactical gain without principles and without knowing where you're going. Multiply this problem by 1,000 if you're president. And it's when a developer encounters political resistance that his sense of victimhood really kicks in. Trump has called himself a counterpuncher. Once offended, he reacts with little restraint. But Twitter insults are pretty trivial. The presidency is not. And, without being specific about things, it's easy to appear to be on the nose. But I thought a pretty good piece, all in all, nonetheless, a good accompaniment to Ben Adler's thing and the reminder from 2015 about the opening of the golf course. All relatively unimportant, true. But, I don't know, important background, I thought. By the way, speaking of unimportant but interesting further background, apparently Trump also squeezed another visit to the restaurant in the D.C. Trump Hotel into his weekend as well. So 2 visits to the Trump National Golf Course, I think now totaling 13 visits to the golf course in the first 9 weeks of the Presidential Apprentice, and 2 visits to the Trump restaurant in the hotel where they burn the steaks for him. Okay. Let's see. I guess other news from the weekend. Man, let's see. What else should we pay attention to? To do a quick roundup of everything that made news over the weekend before rolling into some other issues. I mean, the crazy stuff. Let's see. Jared Kushner is back in the headlines. He was in the headlines on Friday. Apparently, Trump was mad that while the health care bill was going down, Jared and Ivanka and the rest of his kids and daughters-in-law and the families were all skiing in Aspen. Apparently, that was a big deal. And I think they went for a week, right? Didn't they leave for Aspen when he originally went to Mar-a-Lago last weekend, and then they were still there? And I think Kushner came back towards the end of the week. Didn't seem to make a great deal of difference, but he was angry about somehow something was wrong with Kushner being away, even though he had nothing to do with health care. Now that he's back, apparently Trump is going to assign him the task of fixing everything in the government. I don't even know where that came from, but he's got, I guess, something in mind like the Reinventing Government program that Gore oversaw. He's going to give this to Kushner. So Kushner is presidential advisor and going to reform the United States government and also do Middle East peace and take care of all that stuff. Don't worry about it. He really trusts Jared Kushner. I throw that out there just so we can also note that ProPublica this morning, noting that Jared Kushner had an undisclosed meeting with the head of a big Russian bank that's under sanctions to discuss, as he says, quote, nothing of consequence. Apparently the New York Times covering this one, and ProPublica tweeting around a screen grab here that tells us Mr. Kislyak's request, the spy and ambassador, and that's true of all Russian ambassadors and probably American ambassadors to Russia as well, to some extent. Mr. Kislyak's request, Mr. Kushner later met, at his request, later met with Sergei Gorkov, the chief of, oh my goodness, it's a very long Russian word that ends in bank. It begins in V. Vinesh, there's very small type as well. Vinesh Econom Bank, like economic bank. Vinesh Econom Bank. I guess they're a little bit like German, the way they run everything together. The chief of this bank, which the United States placed on sanctions, the sanctions list after President Vladimir Putin of Russia annexed Crimea and began meddling in Ukraine. A White House spokeswoman, Hope Hicks. Hey, how does she do this? She confirmed those meetings, saying in an interview that nothing of consequence was discussed and that they went nowhere. Why'd they have him? I don't know. Mr. Gorkov, who previously served as deputy chairman of the board of Sberbank, I can't tell if that's SBER, Russia's largest state-owned bank, could not be reached for comment. So anyway, apparently more investigation into a Jared Kushner Russia connection as well. So just add that to the pile. There's the revelations of Devin Nunes diving out of a Uber car, driving around Washington, D.C. in the dead of night and disappearing into the darkness, and then showing up the next day with all sorts of revelations about classified information of some sort, and nobody knows where he went to get it. There's a lot of weirdness involved in that, and I'm sure we can get around to rounding some of that stuff up later in the week, too. Let's see. There's other things to catch up on as well. I told you Ivanka being weird as well, and we didn't get to that last week, but you might have heard by the end of last week, we might have mentioned it, that she's taking on something, and no one knows what. Donald is giving Ivanka a West Wing office, and I assume she's already got control of the East Wing, which is traditionally designated for the First Lady, and she's sort of playing that role. And as unusual as that is, I don't really object to that in any way. Who cares whether Melania Trump plays that role or not? If it's uncomfortable for her, I'm sure nobody cares one way or the other, and it's absolutely fine if she decides she doesn't want to do it. Anyway, I guess Ivanka's taking over this stuff, but she's going to get a West Wing office. It was listed, and also, though no title had been named, she was going to get some kind of job, I'm sure, of some kind. No salary for her, because they don't take salaries except when they do, right? But a West Wing office and a government issued secure mobile device. of some kind. I assume that means cell phone. And it occurred to me last week, and I don't know whether I made mention of it or not, but here's my guess. I don't think Ivanka cares about having a job in the White House, and I don't think she cares about having the office in the White House, although that is a prestige thing. So she probably says, yeah, sure, I'll take that too. Here's what I think. I think she wanted the phone and maybe one other thing. I think she wanted the secure mobile phone, one, so that she didn't get hacked like the Manafort girl, for one thing, right? The Manafort woman is an adult daughter, she is. But whose texts we ended up reading last week because she got hacked. One, she doesn't want that to happen. And two, she wants to be able to blab with her dad and for her dad to be able to blab with her about stuff that could be classified. Oh, yes, she was getting a security clearance to go with all this stuff. It's kind of like a package thing. You're going to get the White House West Wing office. You're going to have a security clearance as well. And we're going to get you a secure government phone. One of the things that was not listed in the list of benefits, though, that comes with that typically, plus, of course, being a member of the president's family, portal-to-portal Secret Service car service, essentially. In other words, the Secret Service will have cars parked outside of her house in D.C. at all times when she is there. And, of course, protection detail even when she's not. But in other words, you can walk straight out of the house and they'll have a chauffeured SUV right at her door waiting to pick her up. They'll take her wherever she wants to go, whether that's to exercise class or a play at the kids' schools or to the White House or what have you. Portal-to-portal car service comes with the package. I believe she wants that, although, she could have hired that, but why pay for it when you can make the government pay for it instead? Two, she wanted the cell phone so she could speak to her dad casually about anything, important or otherwise, and one, not be hacked, and two, not be accused of leaking or having leaked to her national security information. She will have a security clearance. The president, of course, has a security clearance. If they speak on a secure phone, who can complain about him giving her classified information? We all can, because there's nothing of use that she can do with it, likely, but it won't be illegal. The president can pretty much instantly declare it not to be illegal, but you don't want to get into that game all the time. Why not give her the security clearance? Could she make a security clearance on her own? I don't know, but it doesn't matter. The president can simply grant it. The mechanics of that being security clearance. I mean, it's not in the Constitution, right? What is a security clearance? It's essentially an extension of the president's executive authority by, declaration of the president, or in fact, as he, usually generally designates the task to someone else, say, check that person out. And if they meet certain criteria, and that criteria can be up to you, you decide what you think constitutes, enough loyalty and mindfulness of security that they can have their security clearance, and I'll rubber stamp it essentially. I give you the authority to make that decision, but also you only have it as an extension of my authority to grant that. So for people who aren't personally familiar to me, I grant you the authority to figure out whether or not they're trustworthy. For people I know, I can simply retain that responsibility myself. I grant you security clearance. So he's going to just grant Jared and Ivanka security clearances. Never mind, of course, the post-election, pre-inaugural stories about the news coming out that maybe his kids all wanted or might all seek, or he might seek to give them security clearances. And then he was found out about that and he denied it, and now the exact opposite will obtain. Instead, I don't know whether he's given that clearance to the rest of his adult children, but I assume at some point he will, if he finds that he ends up talking, presidential business with them, which he's not supposed to do because blah, 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 divestment, etc. But that was all a lie anyway. So eventually they'll all end up with security clearances just to keep the president out of trouble. So anyway, that was my supposition, and the car service thing has kind of come to manifest itself. This written up in the Washington Post. Paul Schwartzman and Peter Jameson reporting on D.C. politics, in the D.C. politics section. Ivanka Trump's Secret Service detail roiling her D.C. neighbors. And here is an interesting story both of her privilege and theirs. Ivanka Trump's neighbors delivered a handwritten note welcoming her to their gilded Northwest Washington zip code after she and her husband, Jared Kushner, moved from New York with their 3 small children. When the president's daughter did not respond, Rona Friedman, an attorney who lives next door, understood. Ivanka was busy settling in, she figured, but Friedman and other neighbors were far less patient when 2 no parking signs appeared outside the Trump-Kushner house and Secret Service SUVs began swallowing the spots on Tracy Place Northwest, their block in the Kalorama neighborhood. Their exasperation peaked Monday when city workers installed 2 additional no parking signs, not in front of the Trump's house, but outside Friedman's residence next door. I started screaming, Friedman said. Then she began writing emails. And not just any emails, the wealthy denizens of these neighborhoods, they got people to reach out to. On Friday, after discussions between the Secret Service and aides to Mayor Muriel E. Bowser, a Democrat, city workers removed the signs outside Friedman's house, liberating that portion of the block for any mere mortals seeking a spot for their car. Score 1 for the resistance. With their long history of hosting Washington dignitaries, Kalorama residents were largely unfazed when they learned that the Trump-Kushner clan, as well as former President Barack Obama and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, were moving into the neighborhood after President Trump's election. The neighbors are willing to put up with Secret Service blockades on both ends of Belmont Road Northwest, the nearby street where Obama lives. I lived on Belmont Road Northwest, by the way, but several blocks over, not quite as fancy, and not continuous Belmont Road. It gets interrupted all the time. Anyway, they were able to put up with that. He's, after all, a former president, and they appreciate that the State Department's security detail placed a relatively few unobtrusive orange cones outside Tillerson's house on 24th Street Northwest. But the security surrounding the 6-bedroom house that Trump and Kushner rent? Are you kidding me? Asked Marty Robinson, a trial attorney who lives across the street. This is the adult child of the president. Sometimes there are 10 cars out here. Metal barricades along Tracy Place and Kalorama Road now make it impossible for pedestrians to use the sidewalk bordering the house. Neighbors talk of clusters of Secret Service agents lingering on the pavement, conversing in loud voices. Oh no. And even changing their shirts in public view. That must be annoying but weird. They've completely taken over the whole street. As if they have the authority, said Robinson. Well, I don't know if I would necessarily dispute Secret Service's authority to do it, but it may be that under it all they don't have that authority. And Robinson is an Obama appointee, by the way, to the U.S. Product Safety Commission. In her own email to the mayor, Robinson wrote that the Secret Service encampment, quote, has totally ruined my peaceful enjoyment of my house. And that's the terminology you use in order to declare someone else a nuisance. But it does make it sound kind of annoying, like peaceful enjoyment. That's your big problem? It is every bit as disruptive as if a very active business was allowed to come into this residential neighborhood, she wrote. It does sound kind of irritating, doesn't it? Her letter, actually. This being Washington, it's no surprise that a former congressman also lives in the neighborhood, and that he frames the conflict in purely ideological terms. We're just a little story in a cosmic bigger story, which is the whole Trump phenomenon and how they push their way around, said Toby Moffett, a Democrat who represented Connecticut in the House and still lives in D.C. for some reason. You have people coming and going. You have 3 or 4, sometimes 5 SUVs that are very big and that aren't from the neighborhood. Ooh, spooky. Friedman has a garage for her own car, but she said parking can be a challenge for people who visit. Terrible. If you happen to miss that moment before spaces get filled, you're dead, she said. We were a nice, quiet residential community, and we've become a neighborhood where people take pictures. Hope Hicks, again in the news. How does she do it? A White House spokeswoman referred questions to the Secret Service. How does she refer questions to others? Amazing. A spokesman for the agency in an email wrote that the Secret Service makes every effort to collaborate with businesses and residents to minimize disruptions, while simultaneously maintaining the highest level of security for the individuals we are mandated to protect. Kevin Harris, a spokesman for Bowser, said city workers installed the no parking signs at the request of the Secret Service, prompting immediate complaints from 5 neighbors. David Bender, chair of the local advisory neighborhood commission, said he has received frustrated emails from a dozen residents. Even before Obama, Trump, and Kushner moved to Kalorama, parking was a challenge. A nearby mosque draws large gatherings of worshippers, many of whom park their cars on neighborhood streets. All this stuff that has been building up sort of boiled over, Harris said. Harris said the neighbors' complaints prompted mayoral aides to negotiate a deal with the Secret Service to remove 2 of the 4 no parking signs Friday. In January, after Trump and Kushner moved into the house, Friedman and her husband wrote the note to the couple on engraved stationery. It said, "Welcome to Kalorama. We know you're going to love it. We have. That's how we know you're going to love it. We loved it, so therefore you will, because we're all the same." Well, that's nice. Friedman recalled, anyway, what that note said, adding that she threw in a line about that her 2 dogs love children. Not to eat, but to play with. A few weeks ago, Friedman's husband, Don, was walking their dogs when he spotted Ivanka out for a stroll with one of her children. "Hi, I'm Don. I live next door," he said. "Hi, I'm Ivanka," she responded with a wave. It was raining, so there was little chance to linger. There have been occasional sightings of Trump and Kushner, including last Sunday at a local playground with their children. For the most part, though, neighbors say they rarely see the couple. When Ivanka moved in, we were all excited to shine a spotlight on our pretty little neighborhood, said Kay Kendall, who lives on Tracy Place with her husband, AOL International founder Jack Davies. Kendall, chair of the district's Commission on the Arts and Humanities, even envisioned throwing them a welcoming party. "I felt friendly. There was a friendliness," she said. "I think those signs were not friendly. What can I say?" Well, you should say probably a little bit less about that. But anyway, an interesting story nonetheless. I think that basically, one, she's not mixing with the neighbors all that well. But yeah, it looks to me like what she was into the whole White House package and security clearance and whatnot story was to get a phone that wouldn't get her dad in trouble if he blabbed about something he shouldn't, that would allow her to give him advice, and a security clearance that would allow Jared to speak frankly with her as well, but also that would get her some car service and would mean that there wouldn't be any difficulty and you wouldn't have to double park cars and wait for her if she took her time getting out of the house. So she set up a very nice lifestyle for herself, and all it's costing us is I don't know how much money, plus security clearances, and God only knows what's going to come with that. Okay, let's see. Other things that need to be shared as well. I don't know. Is there anything? Probably. We'll see if we can squeeze 1 or 2 more things in here before handing things over to the guys on the after show. Oh, here's a little bit. Just sort of interesting. In Politico, a couple of things. Staffing issues, I guess. One, quick and dirty. You remember Rona Graff? She's the trusted, longtime, sort of personal assistant to Donald Trump that kind of even became famous a little bit on The Apprentice, and whose name came up when we were trying to figure out whether she had any relation to the Graff jewelers that the Trump boys were using to give away freebie engagement rings in exchange for product placement on the Apprentice. And I don't think we ever made that connection. I don't think it exists. Politico has a story. Politico has the next 2 stories. We got this one from Tara Palmieri, who writes the story, "Need to reach Trump? Call Rona. The president's acquired a White House staff, but his old friends still prefer to go through his longtime Trump Tower assistant. Apparently, a Trump organization employee still controls direct access to the president despite the entire official apparatus, and all we pay for that and all of the record keeping that goes along with it in order to keep an administration transparent. If you want to avoid transparency, you can still do it." That's the gist I take away from the story, but it's really supposed to be a nice human interest story about what a lovely person Rona Graff was and still is. And I'm sure she is quite lovely at that. The other story also from Politico, just to kind of keep us up to date on this trajectory. Boris Epstein is out. I think the last we heard of him, he was bullying television news producers and booking staff and threatening to withhold White House staff from their entire networks unless they did things the way he wanted. And they kind of laughed in his face, and everybody was offended, and everybody realized, no, a television producer is actually somewhat more important than that. Boris Epstein on his way out. Annie Carney and Josh Dawsey reporting. Top Trump TV surrogate to leave high-profile post. I don't know if they get right down to it and say exactly why necessarily, but this is the story. Boris Epstein, a special assistant to the president who oversees Donald Trump's television surrogate operation, is expected to leave his high-profile post, multiple sources close to the administration told Politico. The well-known combative talking head who fiercely defended Trump on television during the campaign, first as a surrogate and then as a paid campaign staffer, is expected to remain in the administration, but possibly in a less visible role. We are discussing opportunities within the administration, a senior administration official said in an email Saturday night. Epstein didn't respond to any requests for comments. His official job now, until he's booted out from it, is to oversee White House officials who appear on television to speak on behalf of the administration and defend and explain Trump on TV himself. He had been aligned with Kellyanne Conway in pushing the administration to use cabinet secretaries to talk about policies on television and reduce the on-air profiles of White House staffers, but Epstein had added to the impression of an antagonistic White House by throwing his weight around in network green rooms in a manner that has further strained the relationship between the administration and television networks. Earlier this year, he had threatened to pull all West Wing officials from appearing on Fox News after a tense appearance on Bill Hemmer's show. So there you have it. He's on his way out, and, let's just go and see who he ends up replacing with, if anyone. And by the way, interesting tidbit at the end of this article. Epstein entered Trump world as a surrogate thanks to a friendship with Eric Trump, developed as a fellow undergraduate student at Georgetown University, in case you were wondering how he entered the orbit. Okay, well, there's a lot we didn't get to today, and who knows whether we'll get to it during the balance of the week. I can tell you what's coming up on the after show and what they will pick up slack for us on in just a moment. Once we roll the music that cues that whole part of the operation, let's switch over. It's Metaphor Monday on the after show, as you know, and, that's the day, and they call things what they are. And that's an easy process, don't you think? We should stick with that one, too. Trump won't. We should do it. Team Trump, speaking of those guys, have I mentioned them today? They roll out their new plan to kill climate action while making up facts that will ruin your children's lives. They love making up facts. Ivanka Trump is set to attend a women's empowerment summit in Berlin next month. Gosh, they love the Trumps over in Germany. And motivational speaker Tony Robbins slams Trump for his fake alpha identity. That should be interesting. For the last half, they'll be reporting that Trump's Pentagon budget, more guns and less butter, is great news for middlemen of military hardware. And that usually means my entire neighborhood as well. I don't know if they're necessarily military people, but contractors galore all over Northern Virginia. And Trump is really like Andrew Jackson in one important and largely ignored way. And gosh, I can't even take it anymore. Please don't tell me what that way is. All right, you will, but then you'll follow it up with more great stuff. All of that, of course, plus the Connect, Unite, Act, Daily Coast Community Calendar, and more on the After Show with Wink and Justice coming up right here on Netroots Radio after this. Thanks for listening. Here we go, another week.
From Daily Coast Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
One thing I did forget to mention, and it finally got some attention this week, the government shutdown is looming. Yes, we've got about a month left until that. That's the next thing. That's going to cap off the most fantastic 100 days for this guy. What a winner this president is. Lots more to look at this week. We'll be back tomorrow and the rest of the week to do that. Stay tuned.